Hello and welcome to the Crimson Stitchery video channel about making all things beautiful and useful. My name is Anushka and you can find me elsewhere online as the Crimson Stitchery, and I'm coming to you today from my garden, which is only a few meters away from my normal spot over on the sofa indoors, the Crimson Stitchery being the place, the crimson red place where I sit and get up to all of my normal making kind of tasks, but I'm outdoors today. Coming to you with a slightly different episode this week. Last week we had the good fortune to go away on holiday to Cornwall. It was absolutely amazing and we had this fabulous relaxing time, but unfortunately the weekend that we came back we were alerted that we had in fact been in contact with people who had tested positive. So we've had to self-isolate or quarantine, and that's taken quite a while to get sorted out. And so that's obviously been quite disruptive and eaten into my kind of video recording time. And so looking for a quick and easy video idea to do, I turned to you guys and decided to host an Ask Me Anything. I put a question sticker up on my Instagram stories, as well as opening up the chance for questions over on the Discord server, which is our place for chatting away, a private space for people who support the Crimson Stitchery over on Patreon. And just a quick heads up to my patrons, some of you guys have got different usernames on Instagram, Discord, Patreon, YouTube, so I think I recognise most of you guys who asked the questions that were patrons, but I do apologise in advance. And also the neighbours decided to put up some scaffolding all morning, so let's hope that they finish doing that and that they won't come back to do even more construction work. So I'm going to be reading out questions from my phone. Some of the questions had sort of similar themes, so I'll put them up on screen as well. And I'm just going to do this for around 20 minutes or so, or until the camera battery runs out, whichever comes first. So I probably won't be able to tackle all of the questions unless I manage to speak really quickly, which, to be fair, I often do anyway. Knitted by Whitney. Hi Whitney, Whitney's a patron, asked what's your decade or hysterical error for clothing, and I was also asked if you could go backwards in time to look at the clothes, what year would you choose and why? And this is a really lovely question to get, thank you for asking it. I think that my favourite decade for clothing interest is probably the 1930s, because I think it was just such an exciting time for fashion and dress, as well as with the growing dominance of Hollywood, and design for the silver screen was so exciting. There were so many lovely, amazing silhouettes during that period, and real innovations that came in pattern cutting and tailoring. It was also an exciting time all the way around the world for fashion, because you see, for example, in countries where there was like a British colonial presence and so on, you see kind of these interesting examples of hybrid dress in between so-called traditional or so-called ethnic styles and modern Western fashionable fitted tailored clothing. That's something that I find really exciting, and I studied this idea of fashion hybridity in my master's degree, and I followed that up during my PhD as well. So yeah, probably the 1930s. Also what's exciting to me is how, especially in the West, but actually around the world, you know, women had growing freedoms and, you know, the ability to social acceptance to go out and work much more, and more options kind of starting to become available. And I think that that kind of ties into the way that fashion history, you know, developed as well through that period. I do like other periods as well, and I also enjoy other interpretations of the 1930s. So I really enjoy 1970s interpretations of the 1930s, you know, from early 30s through to the end. So I love the Art Deco styles. And then another thing that's quite interesting about that period is the sort of increase in terms of active physicality, especially for women's bodies. So the idea that women, you know, it was becoming more and more socially acceptable and encouraged for women to go out, swim in the sea, do sun tanning, you know, just kind of get out and experience the world, as opposed to this idea of sort of closeted, quiet domesticity being indoors, as is sort of a bit more promoted through the 19th century. I'm speaking broadly, and I guess I'm mostly talking about middle and upper class women. Obviously, lower class women would have to do, you know, whatever it took, as, you know, was as dictated by their socioeconomic status. But in general, I think it was a really, really interesting period in history. In spite of the fact that maybe it's sort of, when it comes to American history, it's obviously dominated by sort of depression rhetoric, which was really tough, obviously. But then again, within that, you know, those boundaries, there's so much potential for innovation. As you can see, I could keep going on about this for absolutely ages, and that's my academic training and background. So I'll leave this one there and move on to another question, but thank you so much for that. Okay, what fibre do you like most beside wool? And I was asking a few other ones about fibres, actually. What's your favourite fibre types to knit? Do you knit as much in the summer? Favourite summer yarns, cotton, linen, hemp, question mark. And that's a really timely question since we're sitting outdoors now. Yes, my favourite fibre probably is wool to knit with, but I also enjoy cotton, and I enjoy cotton blends like cotton blended with wool and so on. I know that some people find cotton can be a little bit hard on the hands to work with, but I think it depends on the exact type of yarn that you have. Some cotton yarns are really loosely plied and they kind of fall apart, so you might feel that you put a lot more tensioning in your hand physically to kind of get it to come together, but other cottons have got a high twist, or they're nice and plump and juicy feeling. So yeah, definitely the answers to all of those questions would probably be cotton, but I do really enjoy knitting with wool. It's just so supple and elastic and responsive, and I feel like I've got so much more to learn about different wool fibres as well as different yarn types in terms of the spinning and the construction. I'm kind of a novice, to be honest with you, primarily because I just kind of work with whatever I have around me, so I haven't really had that much opportunity to sort of actively go out and like purchase lots of different types of wools and lots of different types of fibres, but that's something that I'm really, really enjoying learning much more about. Staying on the subject of yarn, Denisa asks, have you enjoyed working with chunky yarn as much as fingering weight yarn? So for those of you who are newer to the channel, I decided over the last year or so that I wanted to explore chunkier and bulkier yarns a bit more, and I've been doing that this year. So it's kind of newish to me. I think I probably knit with heavier yarns when I first started knitting, because there was so much of that motivation when you manage to finish a project quickly, but then I soon realized that, you know, they're physically heavy as well as a little bit more pricey. So then I went to the kind of much more affordable end of fingering yarns for quite a while, and I'm now rediscovering chunky yarns, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a different feeling, it's a different technique, it produces completely different fabrics. So I think I'm trying to think about it more as a sort of case by case basis in terms of what are the fabric qualities of the project that I'm trying to create. And you know, I find that my fingers can move so much faster when I'm using thinner yarns, and yet there is just something about the texture of a chunkier yarn that is still quite enjoyable. So I don't really have a preference. Probably my absolute favourite yarn to knit with, to be honest, is DK or Aran weight, so just firmly in the middle. Especially DK, it really is so versatile for garments, not being too thick and not being too thin, and you know, working up quickly enough. So I do enjoy that, but yeah, just kind of keep exploring and take it how it comes, really. And next, how not to feel overwhelmed with the stashless challenge. I get upset when I realise how much yarn I have. Yeah, I can totally empathise with this one. I often feel quite overwhelmed, upset, disgusted, kind of have all these negative feelings around how much stuff I still have accumulated, despite the fact that I'm working so hard to kind of be less materialistic, basically. And in fact, just last night I started some crochet granny squares that I've got here, so the crocheters amongst the audience will be delighted because you guys are always begging me to do more crochet. So I've got a little bit of that I'll be showing at the vlog at the end of the month. Oh, it's getting really sunny now. The sun's just dashing in and out of the clouds, or rather the clouds are dashing in front of the sun every now and then. But I think you've just got to kind of try and, firstly, I think make sure that you're very, very far away from any kind of yarn marketing. Just switch off from it, unsubscribe from newsletters and unfollow people on social media if necessary, until you're in a better place, whether that is kind of physically, like with your possessions at home, or mentally when you're sort of kind of trying to resolve the relationship that you're having to, you know, your materials and your equipment. and your hobby. But meanwhile, I think just continue to try and see it as an opportunity to create more exciting stuff from things that you already own at home, the materials that you already have, and seeing that as a challenge. Definitely for me, playing with colours and scraps has been an enormous creative challenge and a source of quite a lot of joy and discovery. And again, I alluded to this quite a lot more in my video about my stashless lessons that I'll link on screen now. But yeah, just kind of keep your head down, keep going, do a little bit at a time, but don't give up, and try to kind of put yourself away from any kind of temptation, I think is easiest thing to do. And then just lastly, remember that it's free to look, so you can enjoy looking, but you don't necessarily have to buy it. You know, you can just sort of enjoy the aesthetic experience visually without necessarily having to bring more into your home until you are ready for it. I was asked some questions about inspiration and also burnout. Where do you look for inspiration when you are feeling very uninspired to create? Where do you get design inspo? How do you stay inspired and avoid burnout? Yeah, that's something that I've been learning about how to deal with, especially over the last couple of years since I started my PhD, but really throughout my entire adult life. In terms of dealing with burnout, I think the answer to avoiding burnout and also dealing with burnout is simply to take breaks, a lot of breaks, have as much rest as you can muster, and manage your boundaries when it surrounds work and deadlines as best you can. And also engage in physical exercise as much and as best you can in terms of whatever it is that suits you or is right for your lifestyle, but really as much sort of physical movement as possible away from screens. So, you know, that's sort of a third point, you know, in terms of taking a break, making sure that it's a real break and away from kind of things that are kind of calling us. So last week I was on holiday, the first time in a really long time, like maybe a couple of years since I've been away like that, for various different reasons, and I didn't actually do any knitting. I occasionally read a book. I mostly just swam in the sea, and I came away feeling so amazingly refreshed and so much better for it, and I just had so much more contentment and so many more ideas just flowing around. When it comes to what inspires me in terms of my design, as a designer, I respond really well to briefs. I always have done. I think boundaries are really, really helpful because we've got something to kind of spark from, either guide us or we can push against that. When it comes to the things that I'm making, I'm also quite guided by movement and how we move through the things, through and around the things. I'm often responding to a feeling or a mood that I'm trying to evoke. Again, with the movement, thinking about like the use and the requirements. So for instance, with my summer sock collection that I did over the first lockdown last year, a year ago, I was thinking about the fact that summer socks need to, you know, aerate the foot, but then they don't want to sag, and so on and so forth. And all of those technical properties informed the aesthetic design choices that I made. But I will say that whilst I like to look at bits and bobs of knitting for reference and to get ideas for how people are doing things and how I could do things differently, overall my designing doesn't really take inspiration from the world of knitting itself. I like to go further away and to think more broadly about the world and the cultures that we find ourselves in. Otherwise, I think things get far too self-referential, and then you just tend to see the same thing again and again and again, which is natural, not necessarily a bad thing, but not always where I personally want to be. Clouds coming back now. Claire asked, if you could travel anywhere right now, where would you go? I'd probably go back to Cornwall. I was there last week. It was so lovely, so lovely. First time I've ever been, and I totally get why everyone raves about it. There's loads of other places that I'd love to visit in the world, especially once the world goes back to normal. I don't know if that's probably a bit naive to say it like that, and no disrespect meant to, you know, countries, world economies and so on and so forth, but other places in the world that I would love to visit. Central America, Mexico, I've always wanted to go to Mexico. Brazil, I'd like to go to. where else? It's all warm places. I'd love to go back to Bali. I'm really intrigued to visit Australia and New Zealand, but that's obviously an enormous trip and very, very, very far away. And back to Portugal. We have so many happy memories from exploring Portugal. Yeah, lots and lots of places in the world. Some are pretty far away. I've been dreaming about going to Mexico for nearly a decade now, and I wonder if it will ever happen. But yeah, so much about Central America inspires me. The food, the colours, the landscape, the different climates and microclimates that you get there, and of course the amazing textiles and from the different indigenous cultures there. Just seems, yeah, absolutely wonderful. When I was a little baby, my mum took some time off and went backpacking around Mexico and Guatemala. She went on her own and she brought back all these different textiles like ponchos and even rugs. You might recognize from my Instagram, I have a rug in my living room that I sometimes take photos on. It's stripy, and that's from that trip like nearly 30 years ago. So yeah, very. It just seems like such an inspiring place. And the other thing I thought was really interesting, I've always remembered this, is that my heritage is Chinese. My mum is Chinese, but she said a lot of people in Mexico spoke to her in Spanish or in the local dialects because they thought that she might be, Mexican, sort of visually, which we've always found quite funny. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like somewhere that I'd really, really love to visit. What a beautiful, beautiful culture. So, on the subject of family, I was asked, you've said your family is Buddhist. What specific tradition of Buddhism? It's Chinese Buddhism. My family are, by background, Chinese Buddhism. But I think of my family more as agnostic. It's more that it's part of the culture and the way of life, especially in Southeast Asia, in countries where the Chinese population, especially, is from southern China. So I've noticed this type of, similar kind of Chinese Buddhism is practiced in Malaysia and Singapore, also in Vietnam. I've observed it, kind of similar things, and Hong Kong obviously as well. It's a mix of like Buddhist principles and obviously Buddha, but also the kind of Chinese customs and other Chinese kind of god and goddess figures. The most famous one being Guanyin, who's the goddess of mercy. I've talked about her before because I have a little pendant with her on it. But yeah, I mean, I'm of mixed background, and on the European side, they are Catholic and Quaker. But I identify far more strongly with my Southeast Asian heritage. On that note, DKA Crochet asked, is there anything you feel like talking about and don't because you are worried the viewers might not like? Yeah, definitely. And to be honest with you, religion is one of them. I mean, I consider myself an atheist, and sometimes I even feel nervous saying that. I don't know why. I guess because you just hear so much about like different kind of extremists and stuff on the internet, and obviously my viewers are not like that, thank goodness. And I've been mostly fortunate in that people who don't like me just tend to leave quietly, which, thank you for not causing a ruckus and deliberately upsetting me. Although obviously there's always the 1 to 3% of people, but they're very much in the minority, and I'm getting better at dealing with that. But I definitely put a lot of boundaries in terms of what I do and don't share online. For example, I don't really talk about, detailed family and, stuff to do with my partner very much. And I do try and keep it on topic. It's just that for me, being on topic isn't only like the technical movements of my hands and the things that I'm making. It is talking about culture and life more widely. I think the thing that you've got to realise is that doing stuff on the internet is a performance. It's just like when you're teaching in a classroom or doing public speaking, that's a performance too. So there's sides of you present a certain way of yourself, and there's sides of yourself that you do and you don't share. Because you don't really know who's watching and you don't really know who's out there ultimately. So I kind of just try and put my best and bravest face on it and be kind of relatively careful about what I say. But to be honest with you, like I have never liked labels. I've never been quick to put myself in a box. And I think that, whilst cultures are different and people are different and shaped by the experiences that they have, there are kind of still, I think, some certain universal messages that can cut across different cultures and across different labels, of kindness and community and helping others, and love, and sort of the basic human rights and human needs for respect, as well as obviously like clean water and so on and so on so forth. So yeah, I hope that through what I'm doing on the channel and the content that I create, and I hope that my values come through the messages, and I really aim to foster a welcoming space where wherever you've come from, you can feel confident to create and discuss things to do with your craft and find like-minded people, even if you are on paper from completely different backgrounds. And I think by and large I've been fairly successful in doing that, so thank you so much to everybody, the vast majority of people who do interact with me positively, and who let me know what's going on. I really appreciate you. Gemini, who's another patron, hiya, asks, advice on starting a YouTube channel for knitting or fibre related, question mark. Yeah, this was quite a nice question. I guess I've been doing this for just over 2 years now, so I guess I do have some advice to give at this point. What I would stress foremost is try and figure out exactly what it is that you want to get from it, and simultaneously figure out what it is that you have got to give other people. You really need to have those two in place. Doing a YouTube channel is a huge amount of work. There's so much admin. Learning video editing, lighting and sound and all of the rest of it is another enormous skill that takes a lot of time, and it's ultimately going to take time away from your crafting and your other hobbies. So you've got to figure out what you're hoping to do with it, what you want to get out of it. And also, there's just too much boring shit on the internet. Like, make it interesting for other people too, and figure out what you've got to give. Ultimately, that is what's going to, bring people in and make it successful. I think if you're not so invested in the giving side of things, then you might want to just explore other platforms, just use Instagram or whatever, if what you're looking for is just recording what you're making. But I think to stick at it with YouTube and to stand out, you've got to have an audience and their needs in mind. So what you give to other people can be personal depending on you. Obviously there's some people that have amazing photogenic houses and they film those, and then there's other people who do other things, or do things slightly differently. I'm not going to get into any specifics now. Aside from those kind of two core principles, do explore some technical side of things when it comes to video editing, especially lighting and sound. I realise that the lighting thing, people are probably rolling their eyes because I'm currently sitting under a tree in the garden. But just kind of some basics of good practice when it comes to stuff like lighting, framing and sound editing. And please, my goodness, do not use those horrible free jingles from free sound libraries. Musicians are also artists. If you're going to drop hundreds of pounds on a knitting project, then why be stingy about dropping a couple of hundred, maybe not even that much, on a musician to create some music, some background stuff for you. Please do not use those same jingles that you hear all the time on all of the different YouTube channels in all different subjects. Like, it does my head in. We need to pay musicians, we need to pay artists for their skill, labor and expertise. Gonna get off that soapbox now. Sarah Louise Studio asks, where do you see yourself taking or growing the Crimson Stitchery in the next few years? Thank you so much for asking, Sarah Louise. I have so many plans for the Crimson Stitchery, and I tend not to announce them publicly in YouTube until they're kind of already in place, but there's so much stuff that I've been trying out that has been working or hasn't, or maybe it's a slow burn, and I definitely allude much more to that on Patreon, on the blog post that I do there, and on our Discord, because it's like a closed space, so it just feels a bit safer to kind of experiment there. The main thing over the next couple of years, while I'm finishing writing up my thesis, is that I need to keep working towards getting the Crimson Stitchery to be self-sufficient. So at the moment, largely thanks to Patreon, it is mostly covering its running costs. I have been running things on a complete shoestring budget, and there is quite key pieces of equipment that I do need to buy, like a new computer with like proper video drivers, because I don't have that basically. So I need to do that upgrade now that I know that this is something that works and that I want to do, and that most importantly that you guys enjoy it as well. But yeah, trying to get self-sufficient, trying to be able to pay myself an income so that I can justify the many hours that it spends creating content. So I'm doing that through the videos and through the pattern sales and stuff like that. In the future, honestly, there's so much. I'd really like to have a little web shop because I would really like to commission some products from other artisans and do collaborations. I'd also like to source like secondhand haberdashery and stuff like that, because I often see it when I'm out and about at markets. Plus my uncle is an antiques dealer, so he often, you know, gets stuff for, you know, quite cool stuff and shows it to me, and I'm like, well, I can't do anything with it. But if I had a web shop, then I could kind of curate really nice selection of stuff. I'd also like to continue to do much more conceptual projects. This is something that I dream about, but I'm not able to do at the moment. I think once I do my PhD, I'll probably have more brain space for that. And I'd also like to do community projects and kind of give back towards people that have much less access opportunities for various different reasons and for accessing arts and culture. And again, this is something that I've been exploring. So this, you know, wouldn't necessarily be something that I talk about a lot on YouTube because I'd be doing community projects with community groups. But yeah, just another way for me to kind of spread my message that, you know, creativity is so important in our daily lives and that anybody's got the potential to, you know, learn some new skills and really enrich their, you know, well-being. Okay, my camera battery is flashing and I can hear that the builders have come back and my partner's now having a meeting. So let's try and wrap this up with a couple of quick fun questions. It's Beck who asks, are you in any fandoms or have you ever knitted a garment based off a fandom? No. See previous comment about not liking labels or being put in boxes. I just kind of want to float around freely. The label that I take is eccentric artist. So no, I'm not organised enough to be in a fandom, sorry. Shona Freckles, where to start with colour work. 2 colours and use a grippy yarn like Shetland or any kind of woolen spun yarn and see video about what is rustic yarn. Kelsey Shaw, might you be into hashtag knitters on wheels? I looked this up. This is knitters who are doing roller skating, the 2 and the 2. No. When it comes to wheels, I like bigger, better. I like my bicycle. I'm a nitty cyclist. I wish I could cycle more. But no, sorry. Slowly Honey X asks, knitting or crafting regrets? I do my best to live my life without regrets. I try my best to make the best decision I can at the time that I believe in, and if things don't work out, then that's okay. They weren't meant to be. Saying that, I think I could probably be a bit more focused, but again, now that I'm turning 30 this year, I've realised that the last decade has been about exploration and trying new things and learning new things, and now I'm really ready to settle down and move forward with what I know that I love and what I know that I'm good at and that I think is worthwhile working hard at. So regrets are not something that I try to have that much dabbling with. Crochet Circuiter asks, how come you have an Indian name, or does it have a meaning in Malayan language? Okay, this is going to come across as a bit facetious, but ask my mum. I didn't choose my own name. And also I know that you're just curious and that you don't mean me any ill, and sure, I get asked about what is Anushka, like why is that my name, or what kind of name it is, quite a lot. And for most of my life I really hated that. It really upset me, and I actually wanted to be called Maria out of The Sound of Music. I just wanted like a really like normal name. But yeah, you're right. Anushka is an Indian name. It's also a Russian name. I'm also advised that it's very, very common in France and Francophone countries. The quick and short answer is that it was a bit of fun. My mum liked the name. The longer questioning answer is, why are you asking me that? You know, once someone said to me, oh, Anushka, that's such an exotic name. And I said, oh, David, that's such an exotic name. Old Testament. What did David do again? King David? I was like, are you Jewish? He was like, no. You know, I feel like, yeah, names are very individual and, yeah, not always out of our control, but I've grown to love my name. So thanks, Mum, for that. 2 more, one last practical one and one last strange one. We'll go for the practical first. El Desano asks, how did you learn mending? Any tips for someone who wants to start? Just start by starting. Just have a go and, you know, pay attention to what you're doing. Maybe try and do the same type of mend several times, because every time you do it, you'll improve. I started mending out of necessity, and I experimented, did some weird stuff, learnt some proper, so-called proper techniques. I still don't really know a lot of like really proper techniques, but I think that's kind of part of the joy of mending. It is an active and kind of living and ebullient, transient craft that is kind of shape-shifting. You know, it's not, maybe at one point it had certain conventions, but I think it certainly doesn't anymore. So yeah, go forth and happy mending. Okay, last strange question. Lucy in the Sky, if you could show your hypothetical future children only one movie, which one would it be? I find it so weird when people ask women questions about their reproductive system, but hey, I did say ask me anything, so I guess this is what I get. I would show my hypothetical future children the video of their birth, because I would hope that that was really effective and lifelong contraception for them. So there you go. Oh, okay. Bonus. Plant questions. What's my current favourite plant, and what's my most finicky of my plants? My most finicky plants are all the ones that are dead. And just looking around, my favourite plant, house plant that is currently having a little sunbathe, and it's my newest one that I just bought at the Eden Project. And it is this orange leafed geranium, and it smells absolutely amazing. It's sunbathing and it got a bit of sunburn, but it's got these lovely flowers that make me think about pansies, because they've got two colours and the scent is incredible and I love it. So yeah, favourite is the newest newest girl in town. Okay, I need to wrap up there. Thank you so much to everyone that submitted a question, and anyone whose question didn't get answered, I'm sorry, maybe next time. Meanwhile, I would like to give a big thank you and shout out to all of my supporters over on Patreon, making this channel possible. Thank you so much for your support, both financially and also in terms of moral support, your belief and trust in me as a creative person. It means so much, and you're making this possible. If you enjoyed this video, do hit the thumbs up button down below, and feel free to drop me a comment to respond to any of the many thoughts which I shared in this video. I'm always so eager to hear what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you at the Crimson Stitchery sometime soon. Bye.